Desdemona, Desdemona, I would love to sleep with Desdemona. Othello's like, no way. He goes to Desdemona, he says, where's that handkerchief? She says, what handkerchief? The handkerchief. You know the handkerchief I'm talking about. She's lost it, but she doesn't want to admit that she's lost it. And so she says, stop trying to ask me about silly handkerchiefs. You know that you're really needing to talk to me about Cassio. And she starts in on Cassio again. And Othello just gets irate. He says, absolutely I'm not interested in talking about that scumbag Cassio. Where is my handkerchief? And he begins to treat her very poorly. And it's at this point in this play that we recognize Othello has a possible tendency to violence that's going to come back to haunt us at the end of this play. Meanwhile, he has a conversation with Iago, and Iago says, no, I don't want to tell you. Tell me what? No, I don't want to tell you. No, the genius of that. To say to somebody, I don't want to tell you something, makes them what? They don't go like, oh, okay, good, yeah, right, you're right, don't tell me. That's not the way the human psyche works, right? If you walk up to any pal this afternoon and you say, hey, you know what, there's something I need to tell you, but I don't want to, and then try and walk away, what do they got to do? See, we know how this works, right? So Othello goes, wait, what are you talking about? So, I don't know. I think there's a problem with your handkerchief. I think we may have an issue. And then all of a sudden he goes, hey, I hear Cassio coming. Come, let's hide. In hiding, Othello and Iago together watch as Cassio starts coming towards, and Iago goes, hey, I'm gonna go and confront Cassio. Watch this. And he steps off, and he goes a distance away, and he starts whispering in Iago's ear. And he does like this. He goes, hey, how's it going with Bianca? So you guys having a good time or what? And Cassio does one of these numbers. Yeah, Bianca, she's a lot of fun. He's a player, and he messes around with drink and women, which ultimately will be his undoing, right? He goes, oh yeah, Bianca. And it's like this. And then Iago says, well, you know, it's kind of like Othello and Desdemona. He says that, and then Cassio goes, oh right, Desdemona, he says that out loud, Desdemona. Of course, who's watching? Right, who's watching? And so, then all of a sudden, Bianca shows up, and she has the handkerchief, and she says, I don't know where you got this little trinket from, what woman you're messing around with where you got this, but I don't want your trinket, here. And she throws it in his face. And Othello is, of course, watching. And then, off they go. Cassio, of course, laughing the whole time, going, women, what are you going to do with them? You can't live with them and you can't give them hankies, kind of thing, right? He walks off. Leaving, on stage alone now, Iago and Othello. And Iago is able to spin this whole thing. Did you see how he laughed when I mentioned sleeping with Desdemona? And he even said her name, didn't he? I think he said her name. Othello starts to get enraged. So much so that he has an epileptic fit and he falls down like he's going to die. He doesn't die. He has these headaches that translate into these kind of stress attacks that look a whole lot like he's having a seizure. And Iago just works him. Brilliantly works him. When Othello comes to, he gives 3 commands. 1, he says to Iago, kill Cassio. 2, you become my new lieutenant, since Cassio will be dead. 3, tonight, I will take care of Desdemona. Iago, are you sure? Are you sure that's a good plan? I mean, really? I'll be your best lieutenant, but are you sure? I mean, Cassio is your friend. No, he's a dead man walking. Take care of it. In the meantime, some Venetian nobles show up, and Desdemona shows up. While Othello is talking, he treats her really badly, and in fact, he slaps her on the face. And the Venetian noblemen are like, oh, what in heaven's name is going on here in Cyprus? Things, in other words, are starting to look very, very bad. Meanwhile, the end of our play. 3 things. 1, the first is, well, Iago, he's this kind of guy. He isn't going to kill Cassio. He gets Rodrigo to do it. He says, I'm going to set this up. You stab Cassio and you kill him. Right? And sure enough, that's exactly what Rodrigo tries, only he's kind of inept. And so all he does is he wounds Cassio, and Cassio wounds Rodrigo, leaving him on the street of Cyprus, on the street, screaming for help. Iago shows up. Rodrigo's crying for help. And Iago says, I think it's probably time you die. And so he jacks him that way. he has removed any kind of trail of suspicion because Rodrigo can't speak about what has gone down, right? In other words, Iago has used Rodrigo for what he needed him for, and then he kills him. Meanwhile, number 2, we have the fatal exchange between Othello and his wife Desdemona. He confronts Desdemona, and he says, "You have been sleeping with Cassio. I know it. I have proof." And she's like, "What are you talking about? I've never slept with him. I'm your wife. I would never do that." And he says, "No, I have absolute proof." "Proof? What proof? Where's the handkerchief?" She says, "Oh no, the handkerchief again. Forget about the handkerchief." She wants to talk again about Cassio. And he says, "I'm not interested in talking about Cassio. He's dead. He's the one that slept with you. I know it. He's dead. Where's the handkerchief?" It's at this point that Othello will do the unthinkable. He suffocates to death his wife, Desdemona, by strangling her with a pillow. And he kills her right there on the bed. He kills the woman who loves him the most and has done absolutely nothing for it. Number 3. Everybody starts showing up. First, Amelia. I heard something in the bedroom. Is everything all right with my lady?" "Oh yeah, she's fine. She's just laying there now." "She's not moving. She looks dead." "That's because she's dead." "She's dead?" "Yeah, that's because she messed around with Cassio. I took care of it." Meanwhile, Iago has been caught. Cassio is not dead. Iago has been caught and brought. So we have a final scene where we have Othello, we have Emilia, we have Iago, all right there together. Othello wants to defend himself. "I killed her, but it's because she was messing around." Emilia's like, "Are you insane? That woman would never mess around on you." "No, I have proof." "Proof? What do you mean proof?" "I got proof. The handkerchief that I gave to her." Emilia goes, "The handkerchief?" And then she looks at Iago, and Iago looks back at her and says, "Shut your mouth and leave now." And she says, "No, I will not shut my mouth and leave now. The handkerchief?" And then she says it to Othello, "Oh, you foolish, foolish man. I found the handkerchief. I gave it to my husband Iago. This is all Iago." Iago stabs his wife and is immediately, obviously, trapped. But he has no words of apology at all. Othello looks at his best friend Iago. He's like, "Dude, are you serious? Like, what was that about? What did I ever do to you to deserve this treatment from you? I totally trusted you in every way." "Iago, I have nothing to say to you. It is what it is." Othello steps up. He pulls out a sword. He stabs Iago right in the gut. But Iago doesn't die. Then Othello gives a very famous speech where he says, "I was completely fooled. What an idiot I am. I thought I was doing right, but I wasn't doing right. And I've been destroyed by my friend, the one who I trusted." And then Othello kills himself, falling on the bed right next to where Desdemona and Emilia actually are. The play ends then with a destroyed Othello. Destroyed in every sense of that word, right? I mean, his world has gone completely down the drain. That's the play. Now let's work level 2 and 3 quickly. At 2A, major messages, themes. Well, I mean, we could write a whole bunch of these down. Let's just pick 3 or 4 really quickly. 1, the power of jealousy, the green-eyed monster, as Iago will call it. This is a play that demonstrates on stage what it means when somebody becomes jealous and wants to take revenge, and the nasty ways in which that can happen for poor Othello, right? You could argue that Iago is motivated to some degree by jealousy. He was passed over in the promotion process and Cassio got promoted, or he thinks that this man Othello has messed around with his wife. But it's all kind of a contrivance of a type. Iago wants to destroy Othello, and the way he does it is the green-eyed monster. Number 2, Like so many Shakespeare plays, this is a disturbing play because it challenges this question of who can you trust? Who can you ever really trust? Othello calls him over and over again, honest Iago, honest Iago. He thinks he can trust him, can't trust him. Which does beg the question, how do you know who you can really trust? And when somebody comes to you, even if it's your closest best friend, how do you know when that person has your interests in mind versus their interests in mind? Of course, let's think about Othello as another major message. Character who represents a powerful idea of this dichotomy between the head and the heart. Think about this. For Othello, on the one hand, there is the head or the intellect, right? On the other hand, the heart or the emotions, the passions. I mean, this is a very simple... I've taken students to this performance, and they are who don't know the play, and they just are watching this play, and they get so irate that once one of my students just shouted it out, why don't you just put them all together and ask them? It's a simple question, right? I mean, you got a handkerchief, right? So why don't you just immediately step out from the shadows when you see Cassio laughing with the handkerchief and about Desdemona and say, we're going to Desdemona now. We're going to put all the parties together, including Iago, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. Notice how Iago can play in the shadows and he can keep all of the different moving parts away from each other. So that at no time in Cyprus, after this all starts going down, do you ever have Cassio, Desdemona, Othello, Iago, all together on stage talking to each other. No, no, no. And to that degree, Othello is dominated more by his emotions than he is by his rational. His intellect goes away, and he no longer is capable of kind of differentiating what is good, what is bad, what is true, what is false. He totally trusts Iago. And in that process, the end. Of course, if you'll think about it, Rodrigo is also used the same way by Iago. Brilliant, the way Iago can use people against other people. At 2b, well, let's talk symbolism and irony really quickly. All right, symbolism, obviously you've got the famous symbol of the handkerchief, right? That is to say something that gets left that is the token of all tokens. In the history of art, in the history of writing, this game gets played over and over again after this play. Something that is so innocent, this handkerchief, becomes the central motif in the play as being the lie and the truth. Think about that. The handkerchief is both the lie and the truth at the same time. The ironies, well, of course, that is ironic as well, but notice the ironies. We're going to call them all the way through the play. Honest Iago, honest Iago, honest Iago. Darkly ironic. Iago is this amazing character that Shakespeare creates, where he's in the middle of the play, and he'll step up to the front of the stage in an aside, and he'll talk directly to the audience. He'll do like this. Oh, you guys think I'm bad? Really? You think I'm a villain? Just wait until you see what I do next to this cat. Oh, it's going to be brilliant. Just watch this, watch this. He's so stupid. He'll believe anything. Watch this, watch this. And then he'll jump right back into the play again, leaving the audience going, ooh, we know what's coming, and we can do nothing to stop it. It makes this play one of the most heart-wrenching plays to watch, because you know in the end, Desdemona's getting jacked, Othello is getting jacked, Amelia's getting jacked, and it's all done by this cat named Iago who has no remorse at all. Zero. Unlike most of Shakespeare's villains who have done naughty, naughty, and at the end of the play they kind of go, geez, okay, that was bad form, I'm sorry, and I deserve what I'm going to get. Iago, Shakespeare writes a really disturbing character. Iago never apologizes at all. Well, at 3a, we can obviously ask about jealous husband stories and jealous lover stories. I mean, think about it. Our Troy tale, Menelaus loses his girl Helen, and he goes to war for 10 years. Remember that story, right? Or we can think about, for example, Arthur and Guinevere, Arthur loses his wife to Lancelot. The love triangle stuff. Think about Dante's Inferno, Canto 5, when Francesca and her lover, Paolo, will be killed by Francesca's husband while they are actually in bed making love, right? And for that, they both end up in the second circle of Dante's Inferno. What for you is a similar text? How about this one? In all the stuff that you have been exposed to, whether it be in reading or movies watching or videos watching or even video games that you play, who is the worst villain? that you've ever encountered and jot down why. What makes that villain a villain? Notice you can have a villain that kills a lot of people, right? That's significant. You can have a villain that like goes up and stabs people and kills people and all of that. But it seems like Iago is a worse villain than that, because Iago knows how to use psychology. He can twist things, right? He can walk up to his best friend and say, hey, what about your girl? I don't know. Is everything all right? And then the seed is planted. Ooh. Who's the best villain for that kind of story that you know of? Well, finally, if these texts are great, and I think that they are great, they got to be great because somehow we relate to them. Let's think about this one. When was a time you put your trust in an Iago, and for it you got jacked? In other words, you look backwards and you kind of go, ooh, right? Or, I mean, for those of you who are Lion King fans, the last time you got jacked by Scar. I mean, think about that. For those of you that know anything about that Disney show, right, you know all about how that show is in many ways kind of a repeating of several of Shakespeare's tragedies. Hamlet comes to mind. Certainly Othello comes to mind. You've got a character who can manipulate through language so well. When was the last time you got Iago'd? Okay, we have to ask it, although it's a disturbing question. When was the last time you Iago'd somebody? I know, that's a painful one to ask. But when was the last time you consciously manipulated to create negative energy, and now that you look back on it, you go, ooh. Notice the brilliance of Shakespeare as a propedeutic. It's instructional. You are watching Iago on stage going, that's about the worst human being I can ever imagine. Oh, wait. I think I remember this time when I used a person's jealous tendencies to hurt that person because I was wounded myself or angry at that point. Oh no, dude, I was like Iago once. That's a disturbing. Or notice how Amelia, Iago's wife, plays a similar game. Why would she take Desdemona's handkerchief and give it to her scumbag husband and never tell Desdemona? What kind of friend is Amelia? Of course, at the end of the play, Amelia recognizes, oh no, I'm the one responsible for a lot of what happened. A kind of quote-unquote innocent bystander, maybe not so innocent. What was a time, how about this one? What was a time that you learned too late that you were jacked up? Kind of like Othello. In other words, you thought you were so right. Othello is certain he's right. Thought you were so right, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, no way. I got totally jacked up by somebody I trusted. When was the last time that happened for you? Some of you will say, yeah, that's a very painful memory I do want to have to remember. And yet notice this play allows you to analyze the ways in which that happened. Maybe you were a little too gullible. Maybe you believed what someone said about, dude, I got this text. Can you believe this? She wrote this. And you just assume that text actually came from her instead of from somebody else that picked up her phone and texted it for her. I guess that could happen. You bet that could happen. And I jumped to the conclusion that the text was actually written by her when it wasn't written by her. You bet that can happen. That's called getting Iago'd. Oh yeah. And when was the last time that happened for you? Finally, we got to ask this question because it's a disturbing question. What about the racism of this book? Right? So much of this is rooted in the fact that Iago doesn't like Othello because he's black. And he's mad about that. He's been given this tremendous power as a leader. He doesn't like it. He makes racist observations all the way through. The ways in which this kind of, even if it's not just racism, it's the xenophobia. Othello is he's an outsider, he's a foreigner, he's not from Venice. And to that degree, Venice kind of serves as this place of culture and civilization. Lying takes place, backstabbing takes place. Othello's none of those kinds of guys. He seems naive himself, kind of like Desdemona. He seems naive himself. Well, just to finish now, this play really does show us, it's a great view, isn't it, of how a good person can be ruined through the most nasty of kinds of questions. A villain, a sophisticated villain. Let's think about what Machiavelli says in his Prince. The greatest leaders are the ones who can lie and cheat and nobody knows. Of course, here we have in Iago a tremendous example of that. He can lie. He's able to use linguistic turn, and he can fool people, and then he can manipulate in ways. And he almost gets away with it, right? He almost gets away with it at the end of the play. Shakespeare's got to balance the universe to make sure that he can't get away with it. Well, if these are great works of literature, and I think that they are, they're only great works of literature because, as Aristotle said in Poetics, they serve as kind of like a mirror to see society, right? So that the next time somebody comes up to you and says, dude, I heard this story, and starts to gossip, in the back of your mind you're like, is this legit, or am I being Iago'd right now? That is to say, really, that's the story that you heard? Great, let's go and ask her right now together. What? Yeah, come on, let's go. We'll go right now and ask her. If that's the text she wrote, let's go and ask her right now. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. Really, why not? Because she didn't write that text? Because you're trying to Iago me. See how this works? In other words, this text allows us to see what the world looks like when you take things on face value and you don't do a little bit more communicating or thinking before you have an emotional response. Dude, so-and-so said something about you, and then you go and pound on somebody before ever even finding out if in fact it was ever actually said. Or maybe it was said, but it was said in a different way than it was intended or understood. That is to say, beware the green-eyed monster, Shakespeare would say. Well, thank you. An introduction to Othello.